The desperate call, the crystal spires of Etherian Prime, caught the light of twin suns as they began to crumble. Dr. Keth Morvani pressed his six-fingered hands against the observation deck's transparent walls, watching his world die. The peaceful cities below were burning, their bioluminescent gardens turning to ash under the relentless bombardment from the Dominion fleet. Keth's people, the Etherians, had never known war. For 3,000 years, they had been gardeners of knowledge, healers of the sick, builders of beauty. Their bodies were tall and graceful, with translucent skin that glowed softly in dim light. They communicated as much through gentle telepathic touches as through words. Violence was not just foreign to them, it was incomprehensible. But the Dominion Empire understood violence perfectly. The enemy ships hung in orbit like metallic vultures, their hulls dark and bristling with weapons. They belonged to a species that called themselves the HFY, though the galaxy knew them simply as the Dominion. They were built for conquest massive humanoids, with chitinous armor growing from their own flesh, eyes like burning coals, and claws that could tear through steel. Where the Etherians had spent millennia perfecting art and science, the HFY had perfected the art of subjugation. "Dr. Morvani," came a trembling voice behind him. Keth turned to see his research assistant, Yaila, her normally bright skin flickering with fear patterns. "The Emergency Council is asking for you. They say we have perhaps hours before the orbital platforms fail completely." Keth nodded slowly, his mind racing through impossible calculations. The Etherian Coalition had 27 worlds, all peaceful, all utterly unprepared for this kind of warfare. Their defensive fleets were designed for rescue operations and asteroid deflection, not military engagement. Against the Dominion's war machine, they were like flowers trying to stop a hurricane knot in the council chamber. Holographic displays showed the grim tactical situation. Red indicators marked Dominion forces throughout the system, dozens of cruisers, hundreds of fighters, and troop transports that would soon begin landing ground forces. Blue indicators showed the Coalition's remaining defenses, pathetically. Few and growing fewer by the minute. "The sanctuary worlds have fallen silent," reported Admiral Fesh, his normally steady voice cracking. Kalvani Prime sent one final transmission before going dark. "They're using some kind of neural disruptor weapon that turns our people into." He couldn't finish the sentence. Keth had heard the reports. The Dominion didn't just conquer worlds, they broke them. They turned peaceful species into slave laborers, forced scientists to work on weapons of mass destruction, and transformed beautiful worlds into industrial hellscapes. It was a fate worse than extinction. "What about the other Coalition members?" asked Counselor Vera, her skin cycling through desperate colors. "The Kelar have battle experience from the border conflicts. The Zentari maintain a defense force." "All engaged with other Dominion fleets," Admiral Fesh replied. "This is a coordinated assault across 30 systems. We cannot expect reinforcements from our allies. They're fighting for their own survival." The chamber fell silent except for the distant rumble of weapons fire as the orbital stations continued their hopeless defense. Keth closed his eyes and let his mind drift to the archives deep beneath the capital city. As the Coalition's chief xenobiologist, he had spent decades studying the various species of the galaxy, cataloging their abilities, their cultures, their potential for both creation and destruction. There was something buried in those files, something he had almost forgotten. An old emergency protocol from the early days of galactic civilization, when the various species had first begun making contact with each other. Most worlds had dismantled the ancient beacon networks centuries ago, considering them obsolete in an age of instant communication. But some beacons remained, hidden and forgotten. "There is one possibility," Keth said suddenly, opening his eyes. The council turned to him with expressions of desperate hope. "The ancient network. The emergency beacon system established by the first contact accords. Admiral Thesh's expression darkened. Those beacons were designed to contact any listening civilization, not just coalition members. You could be calling anyone pirates, slavers, or worse. Worse than the Dominion? Kef asked quietly. At least with pirates, some of our people might survive as slaves. The Dominion turns entire species into weapons. The Council exchanged glances, their skin patterns flickering with rapid communication. Finally, Counselor Vera spoke for all of them. Do it. Send the signal to anyone who will listen. If there are species out there who oppose the Dominion, perhaps they will help us. Keth made his way through the crumbling city to the old beacon facility. The building had been converted into a museum decades ago, its ancient equipment maintained, more for historical interest than practical use. As explosions lit the sky above, he activated systems that hadn't been used in 3 centuries. Asterisk. The beacon chamber was a spherical room lined with crystalline transmitters. Each crystal was tuned to a different frequency, designed to reach across the vast distances between stars. As Keth powered up the ancient machinery, the crystals began to glow with inner fire. He stood before the primary transmitter and spoke. In the old diplomatic language, his words carrying across space faster than light itself. This is Dr. Keth Morvani of Etherian Prime, speaking for the Etherian Coalition. We are under attack by the Dominion Empire. Our worlds are falling, our people dying. We are a peaceful civilization with no experience in warfare. If any species receives this transmission, if anyone values justice and freedom, please help us. We offer all our knowledge, all our resources, everything we have built in 3,000 years of peace. Please, don't let our light go out. The message repeated automatically, broadcasting on every frequency the beacon could access. It would reach dead worlds and thriving civilizations, empty space and crowded systems. Most who heard it would ignore it, unwilling to face the Dominion's wrath. Others might not receive it at all. But in a small yellow star system, in a monitoring station orbiting the 3rd planet from the Sun, the message was heard. Lieutenant Sarah Chun was pulling a double shift. At Deep Space Monitoring Station Echo, when the transmission came through, she had been tracking asteroid movements and cataloging stellar phenomena, the routine work that kept Earth's early warning systems operational. The emergency frequency hadn't carried traffic in over 50 years. The alien's voice was unlike anything. In the database's melodic, almost musical, but carrying an undertone of absolute desperation. Sarah's hands flew over her console, recording the transmission and running it through the translation matrix. When the computer finished its work, she read the results 3 times before believing them. Commander Rodriguez, she called to her. Supervisor, you need to see this? Priority Alpha. Commander Maria Rodriguez had been running deep space monitoring for 15 years. She had seen solar flares that could fry electronics across half the solar system, and asteroid clusters that could wipe out colonies. But she had never seen anything like the data Sarah was showing her. A distress call from outside the galaxy? Rodriguez asked, studying the transmission analysis. How is that possible? The signal would take millions of years to reach us. Not outside our galaxy, Commander. Outside our local cluster. The signal is using some kind of quantum entanglement relay system we don't fully understand. Look at these power readings. They're broadcasting this message across thousands of light years simultaneously. Rodriguez pulled up the star charts, comparing them with the transmission's point of origin. The Etherian Coalition was far beyond any territory Earth had explored, in a region of space that human telescopes had barely mapped. But the coordinates were real, and the desperation in the alien's voice was unmistakable. Get me Admiral Harrison at Fleet Command, Rodriguez ordered. And Sarah, start pulling everything we can from deep space telescopes focused on that sector. If this is real, Command is going to want every scrap of intelligence we can provide. At Fleet Command Headquarters on Luna, Admiral James Harrison received the transmission with skepticism that quickly turned to grim determination. He had spent 30 years building Earth's space defense forces, preparing for the day when humanity would encounter hostile alien life. The Etherian message suggested that day had already arrived. They just hadn't been invited to the war yet. "Analysis confirms the transmission is genuine," reported his intelligence chief, Colonel Sandra Kim. "The mathematical constants they reference check out, and their description of stellar positions matches our astronomical data. This isn't a hoax." Harrison studied the tactical displays showing Earth's available forces. The United Earth Defense Force had been expanding rapidly over the past decade, driven by the discovery of potentially habitable worlds and the growing realization that humanity might not be alone in the universe. 3 heavy cruisers, 8 destroyers, and a full marine expeditionary force. It wasn't much by the standards of galactic warfare, but it was what they had. "What do we know about this Dominion Empire?" Harrison asked. "Nothing directly," Kim replied. "But if they're conducting simultaneous attacks across multiple star systems, we're looking at a force that makes our entire fleet look like a Coast Guard cutter. The mathematical models suggest they have hundreds of warships and the resources to maintain them." Harrison nodded grimly. By every rational analysis, getting involved in this conflict would be suicide. Earth's forces were designed for system defense and exploration, not interstellar warfare, against an empire that could conquer multiple worlds simultaneously. But there was something else to consider, something that made this more than just a tactical decision. "Colonel Kim," Harrison said slowly, "in your assessment, what happens if this Dominion Empire finishes conquering the Etherian coalition?" "They'll likely continue expanding, Admiral. Species that make war their primary industry rarely stop at just one conquest. And eventually?" Kim understood where he was going. "Eventually, they'll reach Earth. Maybe not next year, maybe not in our lifetime, but eventually. And when they do, we'll be facing them alone, just like the Etherians are now." Harrison was quiet for several minutes, studying reports and tactical assessments. Finally, he activated his communication array. "This is Admiral Harrison to Fleet. Command Alpha priority. Prepare the UES Retribution for immediate departure. Full combat loadout, Marine Battalion, and our best crew. We have allies to save and an empire to introduce to human warfare." The UES Retribution was humanity's newest and most powerful warship, a heavy cruiser designed around lessons learned from centuries of human conflict. Unlike the graceful curves of Etherian ships or the brutal efficiency of Dominion vessels, human ships were built like the species that created them: tough, adaptable, and ready for anything. Commander Elena Vasquez stood on the bridge as the massive ship prepared for its longest journey ever. Around her, the best of Earth's military prepared for a war unlike any in human history. In the Marine base, Captain Rex Martinez briefed his troops on what little intelligence they had about alien physiology and tactics. In engineering, teams worked around the clock to optimize the ship's systems for extended combat operations. But it was in the weapon systems that humanity's true nature revealed itself. Where other species had developed energy weapons and exotic particle beams, humans had perfected the art of throwing things very hard and very fast: the retributions. Main armament consisted of electromagnetic railguns that could accelerate projectiles to significant fractions of light speed. Its missile systems carried warheads that could crack open asteroids. Its point defense weapons were designed to track and destroy incoming threats with machine-like precision. Most importantly, its crew came from a world that had spent its entire evolutionary history trying to kill them. As the Retribution entered hyperspace, beginning its journey to the Etherian coalition, Elena Vasquez looked out at the stars and thought about the message they had received. Somewhere out there, peaceful people were dying, and an empire built on conquest was spreading across the galaxy like a cancer. They were about to learn what happened when they threatened species under human protection. The journey would take 18 days at maximum hyperspace velocity. When they arrived, they would be outnumbered, outgunned, and facing an enemy with experience in galactic warfare. The Dominion Empire was about to discover why humanity called their world a death world, and why every other species should be grateful that humans preferred to be allies rather than enemies. Asterisk. When Deathworlders fight back, the UES Retribution dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Etherian system to a scene of devastation that shocked even veteran human warriors. Etherian Prime, once a jewel of crystal spires and floating gardens, was now a smoking ruin. Orbital platforms burned like dying stars, while Dominion warships prowled through the debris field like predators. Commander Elena Vasquez gripped the armrests of her command chair as the tactical display populated with enemy contacts. 67 Dominion vessels filled the system, from massive dreadnoughts to swarms of fighters. The human force consisted of exactly one ship. Jesus Christ, whispered Lieutenant Shun from the sensor station. How are we supposed to fight all of them? One at a time, Vasquez replied calmly, though her heart was pounding. She had trained for impossible odds, but this pushed the definition to its breaking point. Communications. Are you picking up any Etherian signals? Weak transmissions from the northern continent, Commander. It looks like some of their people are still alive, but barely. Vasquez nodded. That changed everything. This wasn't just about fighting the Dominion anymore. It was a rescue mission. And humans had very specific ideas about what happened to anyone who threatened innocence under their protection. Marine Bay, this is the bridge. Captain Martinez, are your people ready? The voice that answered carried the confidence of a man who had never met a problem he couldn't solve with sufficient application of violence. Locked and loaded, Commander. Just point us at the bad guys. Tactical. Analysis of enemy fleet composition. Lieutenant Commander Barnes, a veteran of the Titan colony conflicts, studied his displays with professional interest. 15 heavy cruisers, 32 destroyers, and 20 fighters. Their formation suggests they're built for overwhelming weaker opponents rather than fighting pure enemies. But Commander ... He paused. We're not exactly a pure enemy. We're outnumbered 67 to 1. Asterisk. Then we'll just have to make ourselves count for more than one ship, Vasquez replied. She activated the ship-wide communication system. All hands, this is the commander. We came 18 days across space to answer a distress call from people we've never met. We found an empire built on conquest and slavery, trying to wipe out a peaceful civilization. This ends now. The bridge crew exchanged glances. They had all volunteered for this mission, but hearing their commander's words made the reality sink in. They were about to take on an entire empire. The Dominion thinks they know about warfare because they've been conquering peaceful species for centuries. Vasquez continued. They're about to learn the difference between bullying gardeners and fighting someone who fights back. They're about to meet Deathworlders. On the Dominion flagship, High Archon Vexstar studied the scanner readings with growing irritation. The unknown vessel had appeared at the edge of the system and was now broadcasting some kind of transmission toward the planet's surface. It was obviously from another species, but its configuration didn't match any known design in the Dominion's extensive databases. Single vessel, unknown configuration, reported his tactical officer. Mass suggests heavy cruiser class, but the energy signatures are unusual. Vexstar bared his fangs in what passed for a smile among his kind. The Krex High had conquered 47 star systems by perfecting the art of overwhelming force. A single ship, regardless of its capabilities, was merely an annoyance. Hail them, he ordered. Let's see what new species thinks they can interfere with Dominion operations. The transmission that came back was unlike anything the Dominion had encountered. The alien human, according to its words, looked soft and weak compared to the armored might of the Krexhai. But something in its eyes made Vexstar pause. He had seen those eyes before, in the mirror, when he was preparing to personally execute prisoners who had displeased him. I am Commander Elena Vasquez of the United Earth Defense Force, the human said, her voice carrying across space with cold authority. You are attacking a peaceful civilization under our protection. Withdraw your forces immediately or face the consequences. The bridge of the Dominion flagship erupted in laughter. Vexstar himself couldn't contain his amusement. Under your protection, you are one ship against our entire fleet. What consequences could you possibly threaten us with? The human's expression didn't change. You'll find out. You have 60 seconds to begin withdrawing your forces. Vexstar cut the transmission and turned to his tactical officer. Destroy that pathetic vessel. Make it spectacular. I want the Etherians to see what happens to those who dare challenge. The Dominion. But as the first wave of Dominion fighters moved to engage the human ship, they discovered something that would reshape their understanding of warfare. The UES Retribution didn't fight like any ship they had encountered before. Most spacefaring species had developed similar approaches to space combat long-range energy weapons, particle beams, and plasma cannons. Ship-to-ship battles were typically formal affairs, with vessels maneuvering for position and trading shots. Until one side's shields failed, humanity had learned warfare in an entirely different school. The Retribution moved like a living thing, twisting and spinning through three-dimensional space in patterns that should have liquefied its crew. But humans had evolved on a world with crushing gravity, in an environment that demanded split-second reflexes and absolute endurance. What would kill most species merely made humans dizzy. Evasive pattern Delta 7, Vasquez ordered his Dominion. Plasma bolts filled the space around them. All power to maneuvering thrusters. The ship corkscrewed through a formation of fighters, its point defense systems tracking multiple targets simultaneously. Where Dominion weapons relied on brute force, human weapons emphasized precision and adaptability. Each point defense turret was controlled by AI systems that had been taught to think like human fighter pilots, aggressive, creative, and absolutely ruthless. The first wave of Dominion fighters died without ever understanding what had killed them. Direct hit on multiple targets, reported Lieutenant Shun, her voice tight with excitement. Their formation is breaking up. But Vasquez wasn't interested in just surviving the fighter attack. She was here to end this war, and that meant taking the fight directly to the enemy's leadership. Target the flagship, she ordered. Full spread of kinetic rounds. The Retribution's main armament was based on a principle so simple that most advanced civilizations had abandoned it millennia ago, throwing things really, really hard. But human engineers had perfected the concept beyond anything the galaxy had seen. The railgun projectiles that streaked toward the Dominion flagship weren't just chunks of metal. They were precision-guided missiles traveling at nearly 10% of light speed. High Archon. Vexstar felt his massive ship shudder as the first kinetic round struck home. For a moment, he couldn't believe what his sensors were telling him. The human weapons had punched straight through his flagship's shields as if they weren't there. Damage report? He roared. Hull breaches on decks 7 through 12, came the panicked response. Forward shield generators are offline. We're venting atmosphere from multiple compartments. Vexstar stared at the tactical display in growing disbelief. His flagship, the most powerful vessel in the Dominion fleet, had been crippled by a single salvo from an unknown ship. It was impossible. But the humans weren't finished. Launch marine pods, Vasquez ordered. Captain Martinez, you're cleared for boarding action. What happened next would be discussed in military academies across the galaxy for centuries to come. As the crippled Dominion flagship struggled to maintain formation, dozens of small craft launched from the human vessel. But these weren't fighters or shuttles. They were assault pods, each carrying a single human marine in powered armor. Captain Rex Bulldog Martinez had been fighting one kind of war or another for 23 years. He had served in the Australian outback conflicts, the Martian Separation War, and the Asteroid Belt Pirates campaign. But boarding an alien starship in the middle of a space battle was a new experience, even for him. The assault pod's exterior. Cameras showed the massive bulk of the Dominion flagship growing larger by the second. The ship was built like a mobile fortress, all sharp angles and aggressive design choices. But Martinez had learned long ago that impressive appearances meant nothing if you couldn't back them up with effective tactics. "Listen up, Marines," he broadcast to his assault team. "These things are big, ugly, and mean, but they're used to fighting people who surrender when the odds get bad. They've never fought humans before. Let's show them what that means." The assault pod slammed into the Dominion ship's hull with enough force to punch through armor plating. Explosive charges detonated, carving openings that the Marines poured through like avenging angels. The HFY warriors waiting inside the ship were magnificent specimens nearly 3 meters tall, with natural armor that could stop small arms, fire and claws that could tear through steel. They had been bred for combat across dozens of generations, perfected into living weapons. They lasted approximately 30 seconds against human Marines. The problem, from the Dominion's perspective, was that they had optimized for fighting other species that shared certain basic assumptions about warfare. Most civilized species fought with energy weapons, maintained formal battle lines, and generally treated combat as a structured activity with rules and limitations. Humans had no such assumptions. Marine Sergeant Lisa Park ducked under a HFY warrior's claws and put 3 rounds from her assault rifle into its center mass. The armor-piercing bullets, designed to punch through the hulls of spaceships, turned the alien's natural armor into shrapnel. As it fell, she was already moving to her next target, coordinating with her squad through neural links that allowed them to fight as a single organism. The Dominion warriors had never encountered enemies who moved like this. Human combat doctrine emphasized speed, adaptability, and overwhelming violence of action. Where other species might advance methodically, humans struck from multiple directions simultaneously. Where others might retreat when outnumbered, humans seemed to become more dangerous. Captain Martinez fought his way toward the bridge with the methodical efficiency of a professional killer. His powered armor enhanced his already considerable strength, while his weapon systems gave him firepower that could level buildings. But his most dangerous assets were the experiences burned into his memory from years of fighting on humanity's deadliest frontier worlds. He had fought in environments that would kill most species, just from existing their toxic atmospheres. Crushing gravity, temperature extremes that ranged from Arctic to volcanic. Combat against alien warriors, no matter how impressive, was just another day at the office. The bridge doors of the Dominion flagship were designed to withstand siege weapons. Martinez's demo charges went through them like they were made of paper. *high. Archon Vextar had ruled through fear and intimidation for over 2 centuries. He had personally executed thousands of enemies and watched entire species kneel before Dominion might. But as the human Marine stepped through the smoking remains of his bridge doors, he felt something he had not experienced since his youth. Genuine terror. The human was smaller than a HFY warrior, encased in mechanical armor that hummed with power. But it moved with a confidence that spoke of absolute competence in violence. This was not a being that had learned to fight. This was a being that had been forged by fighting. "High Archon Vextar," Martinez said, his voice electronically filtered. through his helmet speakers. "I am Captain Rex Martinez, United Earth Defense Force Marines. You are under arrest for crimes against peaceful civilizations." Vexstar drew himself up to his full height, natural armor gleaming under the bridge lights. "You dare? I am the ruler of 47 worlds. I have conquered species across 1,000 light years. I will not surrender to a single primitive warrior." Martinez considered this for a moment. Then he shot Vexstar in the knee. The High Archon's scream of pain and shock echoed through the bridge as he collapsed. Around him, his bridge crew stared in stunned silence at the human who had just crippled their supreme leader with casual efficiency.